Let me ask you a question. Have you ever overreacted? Someone says something or does something and you overreact in such a way, kind of like a knee-jerk reaction where you, don't behave in the way that really represents who you are. Well, how can you manage that? How can you prevent it from happening again? Today, we're going to be talking about the emotional audit. It's a leadership tool that utilizes self-awareness and self-management. But don't worry, you don't have to be a leader to use this. Today's guest is Dr. Pat Baxter. She's a bilingual educator, global team leader, and vocal advocate for women in the workplace. Her doctorate is in organizational leadership focused on conflict and emotional intelligence. She's a recipient of the coveted Emotional Intelligence Ambassador Award. She's also a highly sought speaker, workshop facilitator, and executive coach. And she's written a couple of books. One is Cool Change, Turning Emotions into Leadership Strengths, and 101 Ways to Grow an Awesome and Resilient Team Using Emotional Intelligence. Dr. Pat Baxter is going to explain how to use the emotional audit and the process she uses to coach her leadership clients to create thoughtful and empowering decisions. Hello and welcome to Dr. Joe's Health and Sanity Call. I'm Dr. Joe, a wellness expert and professional speaker who helps busy people stay healthy, sane, and productive. For more information of how I can help you and your organization, visit drjoe.com, drjo.com. All right, welcome, Pat.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I know we're going to be talking about the emotional audit, and I don't know about you, Pat, but I have been audited, and it is nothing fun about that. So audits typically have a negative connotation. So is this different, the emotional audit?
Well, it's something that it's all about control. It's feeling like you're able to handle what's coming, what's happened, what's pending. The first thing I would ask everyone listening is to think about this year to date and ask, have you had a sense of overwhelm?
Yes.
Anyone who hasn't raised their hand might want to check in. Overwhelm, anxiety, fear, and it's something that I hear every day when I speak with not only my clients but also my own family. And the emotional audit is a process that I have found, and many of my clients have found, to be one that helps them regain control, helps them clarify and think clearly about what's happening.
Now, I like the control word a lot, because the reason why I started these health and sanity calls is because there was so much during the beginning of the pandemic that we could not control. We couldn't control, the virus, how people were acting, so much. And the health and sanity calls got started because I wanted people to focus on those things we could control. So you got me at that, at the word control. We need to control our lives a little bit more. So go on.
So, that's exactly what this process is intended to do. It helps you, what I call, press the pause button, so that you can recalibrate, you can regain your composure sometimes. And that's exactly what an emotional audit can do for you. Sometimes you are really spinning out of control. And the audit has you ask 5 questions.
Okay.
That recaptures your balance, helps you clarify, and really also helps you reconnect sometimes with the true emotions that you are experiencing. So that's a tool you always have to have in your back pocket.
Okay, and I love that. 5 questions. So what's question 1?
Well, the first question is asking yourself, what am I thinking? Am I thinking that I'm in danger? Am I thinking that people think I'm not all together? Am I thinking, what the heck am I doing here? What are you thinking? And after that, you need to start to ask the next natural question. What am I feeling? One of the key premises when I'm coaching around emotional intelligence is you need to understand what you're feeling, and you have to name it to tame it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're feeling upset, if you're feeling angry, if you are ready to tear things apart, you need to name that so you really understand what you're facing.
And Pat, I have to say that has been a very tough thing for me, and I'm guessing other people probably feel the same way. Like, I grew up in a very large family, 9 kids, and I can understand in hindsight why my parents would feel a little overwhelmed with all of that. And it was oftentimes that if we were feeling emotional, it was always, shut up, I don't want to hear about it. Because they didn't have the bandwidth, I guess, to handle it. And so sometimes many of us have grown up to try to shut that down, but of course that doesn't really work. It bubbles up someplace else. So can you give us some ideas as to what are some feeling words that many of us might be feeling right now?
Certainly, when I say overwhelm, you don't know what to attack first. We have so many things going on. It's family, it's job, it's the economy. It's, am I safe? It's one of the fundamental questions that we need to answer in order to be able to recognize and feel what we feel. And if you don't feel safe, the next step is to say, well, what is making me feel not safe? And you can go through a series of questions and figure out what it is technically that's not helping you feel safe.
So is not feeling safe an emotion?
It certainly brings up the emotion.
Okay.
Fear is the fundamental emotion there.
So fear and anger, I mean, obviously feeling happy would be another emotion, but that's, not what we'd necessarily do an audit for. But so fear and anger.
And we can feel so many emotions. I mean, one of the studies from the University of California says that in a 24-hour period, a human can feel as many as 30,000 emotions.
Wow.
And you think about it, you're not always sure, or you're not always, I should say, aware of what you're feeling nanosecond to nanosecond. But you're going through all these senses. You're going through all these, levels of emotion. And some of them are very superficial, and some of them are so deep that they paralyze you.
Okay. So question number one is, what am I thinking? And maybe it has something to do with our job, perhaps, or financial stability, or something like that, right? And then what are we feeling would be the second question.
And one of the things that very often I use as an example is, you're walking through a part of a park, and it's getting dark, and suddenly you hear someone walking on leaves behind you, crunching. What are you thinking? Are you in danger? Are you feeling like you're panicking and you've got to run? So you've got those layers that start to come in. The next question, though, is one that starts to help you get your control back. What do I want?
What do I want?
What do I want?
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel in control. I want to be safe. I want someone to hear me. I want to find shelter. You need to be clear about, so you're feeling this, you're thinking this, and you're feeling this. What do you want now?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what we've been talking about are, our physical threats.
Mm-hmm.
But in a work environment, it might be, I want my leader to hear my concerns. I
Mm-hmm.
want my colleague to help me manage this client.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go into that next question of wanting by getting very clear about what would be a potential solution.
Okay.
So now the next one is my favorite. How am I getting in my own way? Am I assuming that my leader will not listen to me? Am I assuming that my colleague is not partial to helping me? Am I assuming I'm not capable of answering this question?
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you thinking that's getting in the way of addressing this issue? Is that
Right.
next question?
And that makes sense because obviously, if you never ask for help or ask or even try to talk with somebody, then you're not going to get your way for sure.
For sure.
Because
And
nobody knows. Nobody knows what you're thinking. Nobody knows what you're feeling.
exactly,
Makes sense.
And we sometimes make the assumption you should know what I'm thinking. You should know
Mhm.
what I need. And this is especially in relationships.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking exactly that because I wish that my husband could read my mind, but I know that he cannot.
Right.
And I've learned that lesson many times.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how many years of marriage, sometimes they don't hear you. And I guess the other way around too. I can't read their mind.
You can guess. You can guess, and sometimes the guessing gets you into trouble.
And those are people that know and love us.
That's right.
Many of the other people we're having difficulties with don't know us and they probably don't love us. So it makes it even harder for them to be able to read our mind. Good
It,
point.
it's a really mission critical point. I
Mm-hmm.
learned it the hard way when many years ago. I was on Wall Street and I needed to get some additional funding for a project that I wanted to start up. And my boss brought me in front of two vice presidents and I made my pitch. And the one of them started to say, well, and my assumption was he's not going to give it to me. He's not going to give me the money. And what I did, here's the second act. I stood up, pushed my chair back, put my hands on my hips, and said, I need this money. And then I'm like, you know how you stand outside yourself and say, what are you doing? How I was inspired that day, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's a really good point because sometimes our defenses get turned on and it puts us in a situation where we're likely not to get what it is that we need or want at that point.
And
And we've all done that.
I think so, and in many aspects, whether it be in the workplace or in our relationships or with our next door neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big nut to crack sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And asking yourself, one of the things I do is I ask myself, what evidence do you have that this is what they're thinking, that this is what they're planning to do? What evidence? Truthfully, we're constantly giving each other clues, whether it be in language, whether it be in our body language, our tone of voice. I just read an article about how mission critical, again, the tone of voice is when you're trying to communicate with someone. So that's that's something, again, you learn it. You learn it and you take your bumps and you just move on from that. The last question, though, in an emotional audit is truly, truly the core. What do I do differently? If this is not the outcome I want or need or expect, what do I do differently? Is it a matter of changing the tone of my voice? Is it me asking more questions than telling? Is it building on the relationship that you already have with that individual?
Mm-hmm.
And making it one of alliance instead of being antagonistic. So,
Yeah.
what are you going to do differently that will affect the outcome of this?
You know what I think about with that statement is, that line, if I keep on doing what I've always done, I'm going to keep on getting what I've always gotten. And so I think that really is very important. I read a book years ago. I'm sure you're familiar with The Dance of Anger.
Oh,
And
yes.
yes. And it was all about, she talks about dance being, a circular dance, anger being a circular dance. But in it, she talks about the importance of stressing that if you want the situation to be different, you can't keep on expecting them to react differently.
Right.
But if you take a different, tact, different response, different attitude, different whatever, the whole dance of the relationship changes. And I have proven that to myself over and over again. I don't care how many times you're in a situation in which you've gotten bad results. I guarantee if you do something different, the dance can no longer continue in the same way and you will get a different reaction. So
it's interesting. You mentioned at the beginning of our discussion how you've been audited. And if you think about it, you go into that kind of situation expecting to be questioned and dismissed and all that stuff.
mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. Change the way you look at things. Wayne Dyer, I think, said something like, change the way you look at things and things will change.
I agree. All right. So we've got this 5-step emotional audit. The first one is,
Oh, what am I thinking?
mm-hmm.
What am I feeling?
Okay.
What do I want to come out of this discussion,
Mm-hmm.
whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is?
And then the fourth one, how am I getting
In my own way?
Yeah. And many of us have experience in the past where somebody's told us that. So we have to fall back on that. Know thyself to see
Yes,
what we can do differently. And then the
that's
first,
absolutely right. Know thyself. And the last question in the audit is, what do I do differently if I want a different outcome?
okay. You've shared a couple of stories. Can you finish up maybe with one example of a client that was dealing with something difficult and went through these steps and kind of how they processed it?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a client who always categorized herself as an introvert and really didn't want to engage with people, didn't want to ask these questions that you need in order to realize where you are in this potential conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And she really took a big risk. She asked these questions in the sequence, and she said, what do I want? That was her core question. She said, I want people to understand me and not make assumptions. Mm-hmm. That I'm quiet, that means I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm quiet because I'm not paying attention. And she said, that's so far from the truth for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I coached her about how can you communicate to someone through body language, through tone of voice, through individual encounters, if you will, and basically train them to understand because you're quiet doesn't mean you're not listening, that you're not hearing. And she found different ways of physically expressing herself. And she became more animated. She was usually like this, crossing her arms and kind of protecting herself. And I said, if you open yourself up and maybe even mirror the actions of the person you're encountering and talking with, you'll get a better, faster connection with that individual. So she really started to understand the power of doing the emotional audit for herself when she found herself in those situations where she said, this person's not hearing me, maybe I'm not communicating well enough.
Wonderful. And I can relate to that because I'm actually an introvert myself. And it's been a little bit more difficult throughout this pandemic because you're not face to face with some people.
Right. And we've all had to expand our skill set. It's been a challenge for me as well. I'm a raging extrovert. And although when I was a kid, I was probably the quietest one in the clan.
Oh, that's interesting.
I guess I did partly for survival and being seen and being heard. I grew up in a family where truly I was supposed to be seen and not heard. And so I pushed a lot of stuff down. In order to be heard, then I needed to allow the real Pat to emerge. And I talk a lot.
Well, wonderful. It was great to meet the real Pat. I appreciate that. Well, listen, our time is up, but where can our listeners go to learn more about the real Pat and what it is that you do?
Well, it's certainly my website is patriciabaxter.com. And my email is pat@patriciabaxter.com. Anybody who would like, I do have something that I'd like to offer. I have the adjust your emotional thermostat. 8 ways to do that some of the things that we talked about are here. So if anyone would like this, send me an email.
So it's your emotional thermostat, how to adjust your emotional thermostat. Okay.
Yeah.
So pat@patriciabaxter.com. Fabulous. Well, thank you very much for spending your time with us. And I look forward to more conversations in the future.
You bet. And to see you soon is my next wish.
See you soon. All righty. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's Health and Sanity Call, please subscribe to the channel and share it with others. For more information about how I can help you and your organization, visit drjo.com. That's just 4 letters, drjo.com.